Okay, and let's admit all. I particularly like this part of the event because it does feel like you're doing the door in a small village hall somewhere, and you're just kind of watching. There's bunting. I'm guessing there's bunting as you admit people next to the raffle table.
Make you the bouncer. Well, just check.
Yeah.
No one's got any. I want no football shirts, no trainers, nothing like that.
That's what I got into the book industry for, really, to become a bouncer in a small village hall, and to police clothing. So yeah, that's what we're here for. I will just keep doing that, whilst also saying to those who are in the hall with us that I'm Will Smith. I'm from Sam Reed Books in Grasmere, and I may mention that again in a second as we continue to admit people through. But I am delighted that we're able from Grasmere this evening to be hosting this event in Independent Bookshop Week. It's a week that comes around quicker every year. I know that everyone has it in their calendar, and it's a great thing. It's a great thing to host, and it's a great thing to promote independent bookshops. So yes, I'm Will Smith in Grasmere from Sam Reed's, and I am delighted that our Independent Bookshop Week event this year is celebrating the launch of Jenn Ashworth's new novel, Ghosted. Now, we are super lucky this evening to also be in the presence of not just Jenn, but Rowan Hisayo Buchanan, who is here this evening to talk to Jenn about her work. And so we're going to get a real writer's perspective on this great new novel. I'm just going to call it great, brilliant, excellent. I should also say that Rowan herself is the author of two fantastic novels, Harmless Like You and most recently Starling Days. And I'm still admitting people through the door as I'm doing this, so some people are going to
multitasking. Wow.
Have a slightly abridged introduction, but that is to say, yeah, I'm just fantastically delighted that we can be able this evening to hear Jenn and Rowan in conversation to celebrate the launch of, and I'm going to do this, the launch of Ghosted. There we are. I'll just do a bit of product placement. I think we can all hold it up. Such a beautiful cover. Yes, so I am going to pass over to Rowan, who is going to kick off the event. I should just say, before I do that, the event will run for an hour. We're going to have a conversation, reading, and then there'll be time for questions at the end of the event. If you want to pop your questions in the chat box, that's where we're going to find them for that portion of the event. But yeah, until then, please just sit back and listen and enjoy. Rowan.
Hello, everybody, and welcome, and thank you for being here, and thank you, Will, for having me, and thank you, Jenn, for inviting me. So very delighted all around. So probably some of you know a little bit about Jenn. If you don't, and you've just stumbled into this Zoom room, you're in for a treat. It will be delightful. But I thought, we would be traditional and formal and give you a little bit of her bio. So for details, just in case you need them. So Jenn Ashworth was born in 1982 in Preston. She studied English at Cambridge and since then has gained an MA from Manchester University, trained as a librarian, and run a prison library in Lancashire. She now teaches creative writing at the University of Lancashire, in case you want to study with her, which you probably should. Her first novel, A Kind of Intimacy, was published in 2009 and won a Betty Trask Award. In 2011, her second, Cold Light, was published by Sceptre, and she was chosen by the BBC's The Culture Show as one of the 12 best new British novelists. And she's less new now, but she's still very, very good. Her most recent novels, The Friday Gospels and Fell, were published to resounding critical acclaim. She has also written a memoir, Notes Made While Falling. She lives in Lancaster with her husband, son, and daughter. So that is a very quick summary of a complex and fascinating woman. And she is, I believe, going to read to us from a little bit of the beginning before I ask her some questions.
Thank you so much for that, Rowan, and thank you for all the hosting and organisation of this, Will. I really appreciate it, and thank you everyone for turning up. I'm really glad to see so many cameras on as well. I think I've got a little bit better over the last year or so at being able to chat in an animated fashion to a blank computer screen, but it's just so nice to see you. So thank you for being here. So I'm going to read from the first couple of pages, because that means that I don't have to do too much in the way of introduction. Or if I've done a half decent job of writing those first couple of pages, I shouldn't need to do too much in the way of introduction. That last morning, the May sunshine had spilled into the room through a gap at the top of the curtains and woken me before the alarm. One of the curtain hooks had slipped its ring and left the top edge sagging. I had asked him, my husband that is, more than once to sort it out. I turned over in bed, away from the window and the job still undone, and towards the sleeping shape of him, a mountain under the duvet, radiating heat. I put my hand in his hair. When we were first together, I used to tell him he had hair like a bear. I made a fist and held the thick, dark ruff of it in my hand, then let go. I'll admit, I was pissed off with him, however unreasonable that was. Are you awake? We were an odd couple. Me, short and slight, wispy somehow, pale, like a ghost. Him like a brick shithouse. I never found his size and solidity alarming. There was pleasure in it still, even after 15 years, 12 of them as man and wife. The feel of him, his weight, it's ironic, really. I'd always put myself down as the insubstantial one. I huffed, pulling at the duvet, and he opened his eyes. He lifted his hand from where he had it tucked between his legs like a little boy and put it on the back of my neck. You didn't fix the curtain, I said. What? He blinked, baffled. You said you'd fix it. I asked you, it's too high for me. You said you'd get one of the kitchen stools and sort it out. He has always been slow to come online in the morning. I took advantage of this sometimes and used the moments he remained not quite with it, wondering who this angry dream wife was, to say things I wouldn't usually say. I knew he wouldn't remember, you see. I don't know what you were doing all day, I said, lying around surfing the internet while I'm up to my eyeballs. Me at work, you at home doing God knows what. Nothing. You don't do anything. I turned away from him. You're a lazy get. He squeezed my neck, used his other hand to pull me towards him. It is instinct for him in the morning to want sex. We sleep naked. He nudged his thighs apart. He nudged my thighs apart with his knee. That'd be hard to imagine, wouldn't it? He nudged my thighs apart with his knee, pulled me in tighter, and pushed himself with some difficulty inside. I was still quite dry. Did you sleep all right? He said, properly awake now. No, I said, you were snoring. That was often the case, but he had slept peacefully that night, as far as I'd been aware. Sorry, he said, automatically. He thrust into me. It was more of a burrowing, really, a persistent pressure until he was all the way inside. He held me very tight. We lay still. Nice. It was better we did it like that in the morning, his belly against the small of my back. We often had bad breath when we woke up. What time are you in work today? Early. I nodded and he bit my neck gently. I made a little high-pitched growl, something like the noise a cat would make if you stood on its tail, but under my breath, not a purr. The noise, halfway between a quiet yowl and a suppressed groan, had over the years become a kind of private joke between us. Or the remnant of a joke, the way the fossil trace of an ammonite pressed into a rock is not an ammonite, but only a reminder of one. The original joke was something to do with pussy, I think, and the doggy position. We used to be crude in the way we spoke to each other in bed, and I suppose the cat noise was a way of reviving the atmosphere of those days. I wriggled my backside against him, but his cock had gone soft already, and I did what I usually did in those situations and pretended not to notice. We lay still for a few more minutes, not talking, until my alarm went off. I better get up. He withdrew, little sad mouse sliding out of its hole. He rolled out of bed and turned off the alarm on my mobile. He retrieved my glasses from the top of the headboard where I always stashed them just before I went to sleep, gently opened them, then passed them to me, ready to wear. I'll make you tea, he said, just as he always did. I was extremely hungover, just as I always was. It's hard to know how other couples live their lives, but all of this had become utterly ordinary for us. I told the police as much later. I left for work while he was still in the house. I don't know what he was wearing that day. No, he hadn't seemed unusual in any way that morning. The officers, they sent two, a man and a woman who both refused a hot drink and made notes on a tablet instead of in a notebook, seemed frustrated by the fact that no matter how they phrased their questions, I had nothing to add. No suspicious or out of the ordinary behaviour on his part to my account. I didn't tell them I was pissed off with him, but I am telling you now. That's it.
Good. Sorry, the waving was because I was struggling to unmute myself, but I'm now unmuted. So thank you so much for that. And it was lovely to hear it in your voice. Just for the audience, I am going to ask Jenn some questions now, but there will be space for a Q&A at the end. So if you're thinking, oh, these are not the questions that we wanted answered, we have very different questions we want, do add them to the chat. It's not just for complimenting Jenn's fabulous hair, though that is also always approved of.
You can put that in there as well. I'm not going to be sad.
Yes. So I think actually maybe we'll start, given that excerpt, talking a little bit about Laurie as a narrator, because I think that she's not an unreliable narrator in the way that you sort of are taught about in a quite simplistic way, but she's quite a reluctant narrator. There are things she holds back and things she hints at. And I was wondering if that voice came to you immediately, if you knew that she would be this sort of speaker.
Yeah. I guess Laurie as a narrator is kind of defined by the stuff that she doesn't want to say. I think reluctant narrator is a really brilliant way of describing her, actually. It begins with her confessing something to the reader that she has consistently refused to tell the police, which was that she was really angry at her husband as he went missing. We find out in the first couple of pages that he goes missing and it takes her 5 weeks to report it to the police, and that when she's talking to the police about their marriage, she portrays a very different picture to the one that she tells us. And the book as a whole is her looking back from when they met through their whole marriage. And we kind of compare what she tells us to what she's told the police, what she's told her friends, what she's told her mother-in-law. So yeah, I guess as a kind of rule for how I was working her voice in every scene, I tried to figure out what happened and what part of what happened was she willing to tell, and what reasons did she have for not telling. Unreliable narrators quite often are not telling stuff that make them look bad, that are embarrassing, that are awkward. Laurie's okay with embarrassing herself, with looking awful. That's not a particularly glamorous first scene of sexy married life that she begins the novel with. She's okay doing that. What she doesn't want to tell us is what makes her vulnerable, what hurts. And I hoped that by constructing her voice in that way, I'd have a narrator that was kind of acerbic and appealing and funny, but we'd also get the sense that there was something dark and very painful lurking between the lines.
I think we do. I think we get that very much. And thank you for letting us into your process a bit, because I do think authors always know so much more about everything that's happening, and deciding what you're going to give away when is a tricky part. It's a tricky part of it. So I'll have to think about that scene by scene technique in future. So in general, the whole premise, which you've talked about a little bit just now, I find it very elegant, actually, the idea of him leaving or disappearing and you don't know why, and the sort of it just playing out that question throughout the book. And I'm obviously not going to have any spoilers, but I was wondering, did you know the whole structure when you began? Did you know, obviously you can't tell us what happens, but how did you approach that, having a big question like that at the center of a book?
I'm not much of a planner when it comes to writing fiction. I began, and it was unusual for me in that the first part of the novel I wrote was the first few pages, and I did more or less write it in order, which is really unusual for me. So I did know a little bit more than Laurie did at various points, and I also knew what she was going to hold back from the reader. So I knew more than the reader did as I was going along, but not that much more. I wrote the first draft really, really quickly, and I guess it's lovely for you to call it elegant. I'm going to claim that word. What I tried to do was chop off any bits of plot that did not belong to Laurie's story. So there are lots of other stories lurking around the edges with the other characters. All the characters, I think, could have had a novel written about them, but I tried to just sketch that in really lightly, but not allow myself to be distracted. And I guess in terms of planning plot and doing the story, I didn't so much think about what happened, but I thought about what I wanted it to feel like, and what a reader might expect. Stories about missing people are quite often about children or about women that go missing. So I wanted to do something a bit different. Love stories are quite often about two people who don't know each other meeting and getting together. And I actually wanted it to be about a long marriage coming apart. It's sort of a campus novel. And Laurie is a cleaner at a university, and campus novels are often about the boringly bad behaviour of academics. And I decided I was going to write a campus novel that didn't have any academics in it or any students, and concentrate on the people on the campus who actually keep it running. So yeah, I guess that process was very much what is it not going to be, and what was left was the novel.
And I think we really feel that. And you get, I think those scenes at university, especially, you get a huge sense of loneliness and of isolation in this book that's conveyed really beautifully and effectively. And one of the things I was thinking as I was thinking, oh, what questions do I want to ask you? And I was thinking, oh, I must ask something about this atmosphere and how it's being conveyed. And I realized that for a book about loneliness, so much of it is about relationships, and Laurie's relationships, not just to her husband, but to her father, to her coworker, to all of these different people. And I wondered if you were, I'm not saying the book is a polemic, but if there was any sort of particular thing about sort of that, the connection between loneliness and the people who do remain in your life, or at least remain in your head in your life, anything about that you were trying to get at with Ghosted?
Yeah, I guess, I mean, Laurie spends much of the novel really passionately physically missing her husband, who for most of the novel he's remembered, he's thought about, but he's not there. She also spends most of the novel being in quite close proximity to people who really love her and really care about her. She's a best friend, Eddie, who, I loved writing their relationship. They have a really kind of fun platonic relationship, and she doesn't tell him what's wrong, and she's pretty awful to him. She has a difficult relationship with her father, who nevertheless is really present in her life. You know, he calls her baby. He is a flawed man, but he wants to know her. She has a warm relationship with her mother-in-law, or at least her mother-in-law attempts to have a warm relationship with her. And her father's carer, Elena, is also someone who loves her. She's surrounded by people who really care about her, and she is paranoid, suspicious, and pretty horrible to them. And I wanted to write about the way that loneliness is not always about being alone, but it is about she's a reluctant narrator, and she's reluctant in relationship, that she does not show herself. She doesn't allow people to be near her. So I guess it's a cliche when people say you can be lonely but in a room with people. She is, and she is because she's kind of chosen it to be that way.
Yeah, no, and I think in some ways it's part of what makes reading it feel like such a treat, or maybe treat is the wrong word, but an insight, because you feel like you are getting your worming and sneaking your way close to this woman who doesn't want to let anyone close to her, and there is a pleasure in that, and a particular joy to it. So again, I keep wanting to thank you every time I ask you a question. We're like, thank you for writing this book, thank you for this beautiful answer. Ooh, Jenn has vanished from my screen. Hopefully she's still here. Oh, there, it's because I can see everyone, and you've teleported to the bottom, but I can now see you again. Anyway, moving away from
I'm really sorry. I don't know what happened there. I guess if we were all together, the equivalent is just getting up and like leaving and slamming the door and kind of outrage. I'm totally outraged. Carry on.
Okay, well, one of the things I wanted to ask you was about the title, which is obviously Ghosted, and I think you've told us enough about the premise that we, the intelligent people in the audience will be seeing the link. But your other work also touches on ghosts, the idea of ghosts, and I was wondering what they mean for you as a writer or as a person, and why you see them as a theme.
Okay, yeah. So this word ghosted, it's quite a trendy word right now, that if you are dating someone, or I don't know, texting them, and you change your mind, you can just disappear, and technology allows us to do that, to just slide out of a relationship without giving any explanation. And I guess it would be most obviously a word that we would apply to Mark, the husband, who just one day is not there. He leaves his wallet, he leaves his phone. You can't ghost your way out of a marriage. But actually, I think the word applies much more closely to Laurie, she's there, but she has completely absented herself from intimacy with the people who love her. And maybe also to Laurie's father as well, who, because of his illness, is gradually fading away from his relationship with her. So I wanted to think about the ways that people leave each other while being in the room. That was really interesting to me. And yeah, there's also a kind of faint supernatural element that goes through the book. Laurie, she believes in ghosts. She wonders about ghosts. She feels that there's a presence in her flat. I'm not going to give anything away. There's a bit of business with telephone psychics, which I wish there could have been more business with telephone psychics, because I had such amazing, good fun researching it. There's a kind of working man's club that does a psychic night that I went to quite a lot, and tried to crowbar it into the book and just could not. The book would not have it. But I guess my previous novel, Fell, was actually there's no spoiler to say that it's narrated by a married couple who are dead, who are ghosts, and this idea of a ghost that is both there and not there, that can make its presence known in some limited ways, can be felt, can be sensed, but also can't intervene, can act, but is also helpless. It feels like such a gift for a novelist to think about how we show up in relationships, or how we don't show up in relationships, the power that we have to touch each other, to affect each other, to appear, to disappear. And also, maybe my perhaps less intelligent answer is really, really good fun. I love ghost stories. They're my favourite kind of story. I love things that are slightly scary, slightly creepy. I love putting the reader on uncertain ground. So Ghost is a really great figure to do that. I'm writing something now and it's not a ghost story yet, but I don't know. There's everything to play for. It might take me a while.
Thank you. And sort of while we're on the asking you about some previous work and connections, to prepare for this event, I went back to Notes Made While Falling, which is a memoir or nonfiction book, and I came across this passage in which you're writing very beautifully and effectively about ways in which at that time you were struggling with writing fiction, and you call fiction in that your best beloved one, and that's part of as a writer, it's very sort of empathetically painful for me to read that section. And while we're not here to sell that book, though, go buy that book, I was wondering what it felt like to return to fiction and to have this be your return to your best beloved one.
Yeah, I didn't expect it. When I was writing Notes, I was really examining what were the limits of either the novel as a form or my ability as a novelist, or both. And I really wanted to have a really good look at that. And I suspected that if I had a really good look at it, that the thing that I did when I wrote fiction would break. And I'd kind of resigned myself to that in some ways. And my agent was handling Notes Made While Falling, and it was going through the publication process. And he said, do you think you'll write another novel? And I said, oh, I don't know, like, probably not really. Like, I've gone off it. I don't like it. And he kind of left it there. And then 3 months later, we had to have a conversation about something else. And he said, oh, have you got anything for me to look at? And I said, oh, I do actually. I've accidentally written a novel. And he kind of laughed wearily. And Ghosted was really that quick. It took loads of editing. I'm not telling you that it's possible to write a good novel in 9 weeks. It might be. And if you've done it, well done, I am jealous. What I did was wrote a big draft. It came out in a rush of joy. It felt like going home. I loved spending time with these characters. And I think what had changed between writing the memoir and writing the novel was not anything to do with the novel as a form or my abilities or limitations as a novelist, but it did really substantially change my relationship to my practice. So I was no longer kind of planning and controlling and trying to be totally kind of clever about it and in charge of it. I just sat at the desk and wrote what I saw in this big joyful rush, and it was so much fun. I know that this book has got sad parts in, and it deals with some quite difficult material. It deals with, quite strong loss and trauma and grief. But as I was writing it, I felt so kind of happy.
That's lovely. I'm happy to know that you were happy while writing this book. And I do think that is one of the perverse things about reading or writing fiction, is that somehow you can feel so much joy while all these horrible things happen to these characters.
I love being close to these characters. I love these people as if they were real. I loved that something I thought I was saying goodbye to, I could suddenly find a way to do it. I think I also, I guess I just found a way to get at something that I wanted to say that was quite important to me, which was about the way that you can be with people and not be with people at the same time, that I don't think I'd quite managed to do or managed to think through before. It felt like, I don't know, there was a washer on a tap that had just broken and I could get at it.
I like that. That's that very physical thing. No, I do think somehow novels are always discovery, because I'm told you can have internal discoveries without writing novels, but they seem to help.
Yeah. And I guess each novel, like as writers, we do the novel writing, but I also think that the novel kind of does us in a way, and it for Fell, what was required was many painstaking drafts, loads of rewriting, kind of tiptoeing through phrases and sentences. That seemed to be the kind of novelist that Fell needed. And for Friday Gospels, there was a lot of kind of courage, I think, needed. It didn't feel so fun to write it. It felt really scary. And I don't know, for Ghosted, this reckless abandon seemed to be required. Who knows what kind of writer the next one will need.
That will be intriguing, the many faces of Jenn Ashworth. Well, on a slightly painstaking research note, I saw you posting somewhere on the internet, the joys of the internet, about the research that you did do for Ghosted, and about the fact that it's set in a tower block, and that the physical space is very important in this book. Both, she spends a lot of time in her flat, and she goes other places, but the flat really takes on a very strong manifestation in the book. And you hadn't lived there, you lived in other places, but you chose this particular setting, and you found out some interesting details about this setting. And I wondered if you could talk about that, just because I'd like to read about it.
Yeah, I knew immediately that Laurie was going to live in a flat. That's how I imagined her. It's how I saw her as I began to write the book. And I can rationalize why afterwards. This idea of her living in one building with lots of other people who she is intimate with, because she knows their movements and she can hear, and she knows where they work, and she hears a baby crying. She knows that the guy downstairs has got a pet snake because she sees him in the lift. So that enforced neighborliness all in one building, as well as the solitude of being up in the sky looking down over a city. It is a way of performing or expressing these themes of closeness and loneliness. But I'm retrofitting that onto what happened, which is that I imagined her in the flat, and that's what I knew I needed to find out. I've lived lots of different places, but I've never lived in a block of flats, but I knew someone who did. So he might be here, in fact. I don't know, I can't see a participants list, but one of my writer friends, Adam Farrar, I knew that he'd lived in a flat, and I emailed him and said, can you just tell me about living in a flat? And because he is a writer, a really kind of talented non-fiction writer who has a book coming out soon, so do check it out. He sent me the most amazing document. He must have spent a few days on it, and I think I got kind of 2,000 or 3,000 words of facts about living in flats. And because he's a writer, he knew the sort of facts that I would want. So, I mean, really, he deserves a royalty. There's so much stuff in this book that I just nicked from that document. So the fact that the flat moves in the wind and makes whirlpools in the water of the toilets. I think the guy with the snake around his neck was probably in that document. All kinds of stuff. And it was just such a joy to be able to basically unrepentantly steal all of that, is what I'd say. It was good, and other kind of matters of Laurie's daily existence. So she's a cleaner at a university. I spend quite a lot of my time on a university campus. When I was an undergrad, I was a cleaner at a university. I cleaned at a university and was just fascinated by that way of knowing a place, the way that cleaners can be completely essential and also quite invisible, can move through spaces, have keys to everywhere, can see people's bedrooms, can, I don't know, you're like a ghost if you're a cleaner. So yeah, a lot of that experience went in as well.
Oh, thank you. I just, when I was reading about the towers moving, I was like, that's such
it's amazing, isn't it?
Detail. Yeah,
I didn't believe it. I didn't quite believe it, but I looked it up on YouTube and there's videos.
So that's what you can all do for the after party of this event, is watch toilets move into hole.
Toilets on YouTube. A cracking night out was had by all.
Oh dear. So there's as I mentioned, there is a Q&A at the end, but there's a question that popped up there that's very similar to one I wanted to ask you, which is about Olena. And again, can't give any spoilers, which I really want to on this one because I want to ask so much about it. But what I will say is she is a very strong and powerful character, and she has a storyline of her own that is as, or potentially in some ways even more dramatic than the main storyline. And I think you do it beautifully, and they sort of sing to each other, those two storylines. But I can imagine, and Carol has asked, was it hard to contain that storyline, stop her from saying, this is my book?
Yeah, I mean, Olena is I'm biased, but I think she's such a likable character. She's so abrupt, she's so practical, she's so clever. She's one of the few people who does not tiptoe around how fragile Laurie is. She's kind of direct and abrupt when necessary. She is so full of love, and this love is expressed through her hands. She's very practical. She is Laurie's dad's carer, and she started out as the cleaner, and then as she saw that more and more help was needed, she grew to fill that gap. So I guess the question from Carol is about containing her, and I think it's a really great question, because just as she is in the novel, she's only supposed to be a cleaner, but then she becomes a carer, and she starts googling vascular dementia so that she can give really good care, and then she almost becomes a kind of mother figure or a sister or a godmother to Laurie. And Laurie is really very paranoid and annoyed about the way that Olena is kind of overstepping, going beyond her remit, and she's very, very prickly about that. Olena is the kind of love in the novel, in the way that this love is practical, it is abrupt, it is direct, it is not pretty. So I just loved writing her, and she has a backstory that is quite significant, and that does. I guess one of the genres that this novel plays with is, it's not a crime novel, but it plays with certain motifs of crime fiction, which is, what happens when someone goes missing, what happens when there's trouble in a marriage. And I didn't want to go into directly, I didn't want this to be a book about the ways that women are hurt or mistreated by their husbands, but I also wanted to acknowledge the fact that that story does exist. And so if there was going to be a novel narrated by Olena, it would be that kind of novel. Maybe that touches on it without giving too much away.
Thank you. So I'm going to ask you one last question before we have your reading, because I want to make sure there's time to address these really thoughtful questions here, which is, so one of the words you were just using a lot was love. And I think that in many ways, this is a love story. And now I recognize it's not you wouldn't necessarily want it to have like a fuchsia cover and to say ghosted, a love story, when it was, in Sam Reed booksellers, that, this cover gets at its darkness and complexity and, everything else. But it does have a love story in little letters, little gray secret letters. And in some ways, I think that it's doing what you were talking about earlier. You're playing so much with genre, but it's not a satire of a love story. Instead, it's expanding our understanding of what a love story is, of the places a love story is allowed to go, whether that be loving your father's cleaner and having her love you, or this very complicated relationship between her and her husband. And I was wondering, did you always think of it as a love story? And B, do you have favorite love stories? And these can be love stories in the traditional sense, or in the secret great letter sense?
Yeah, I mean, just as I try to mess around with what crime novels could do and what campus novels could do, I absolutely consciously wanted to mess around with what love stories could do. So even though quite near the beginning of the novel, Laurie remembers meeting Mark, she remembers that early period, that courtship, I wanted to make it really clear on the first pages that they've been married a long time. Their sex life is, well, as you have been treated to, is humdrum, and that this is not about that passionate first encounter, the eyes meet across the crowded room, the decision to move in together. It's not about that. It's what happens at the time when love stories end. What is it like to live with someone in a flat for 15 years? What is it like to commit to someone who at times you really, really don't like, and you know that they really don't like you? What is it like to sleep with someone who sometimes has horrible bad breath and you don't want to be around them? And what kind, and you know, the way that Elena loves through her hands, through that practicality. What does love really look like, and how can a marriage or a long relationship contain the totally ubiquitous, ordinary, normal human trauma? How does a relationship hold that? So those are my questions that I kind of went into the novel with. And the love stories that I like. So yeah, non-traditional ones. I knew you were going to ask me this and I didn't want to get tongue-tied, so I've made a tiny list. So Bernard McClaverty's Midwinter Break. I absolutely love this. It's small, thin book. I would love to be a good enough writer to write something as slim. And it's about a couple who've been married a very long time and they go away to Amsterdam for the weekend. And he thinks that they're going away to kind of have a romantic time and resurrect their marriage, and she is telling him that she wants to leave, and we get the history of their marriage, and it begins in this like absolutely brilliant way where he's sitting and he's just having a glass of whiskey in his house and he's got headphones on and listening to music, and she's really angry with him and like turns the heating off, and we sit there and we think, like, you horrible woman, like, let him have his headphones on, let us listen to his music. And it's only a bit later that we realise that he's very drunk, he's an alcoholic, and he thinks he's got his headphones on, but they're not plugged in, and this music is like really loud and echoing through the whole house, and it contains both those perspectives. And that's what I love about love stories, if we can get these really clashing perspectives that should not reconcile, but they kind of do. So I also like Deep Water by Patricia Highsmith. She's not really a writer that is interested in the happy side of love. Deep Water is about a married couple, and it's told primarily through the point of view of the husband, who is a book publisher and a snail breeder, and his wife is having lots of affairs and basically in front of him, and they live together, and it's about what he does. And because it's a Patricia Highsmith book, you will be able to maybe make a little bit of a guess about what he does. It gets increasingly messy. It's almost a farce, and yeah, lots of snails in it as well. And for a film, I would say Tim Burton's Beetlejuice. That they're dead, they're trapped in a house. They all the stuff that married people do, they can't really do, they can't leave, they can't get any space from each other, and some other people come and live in the house. And there's something about that enforced intimacy, and that they're a really innocent, loving, happy couple that remain completely unchanged by the afterlife and the monsters and this like horrible pervert that jumps out of a model and lives in their house. I love that film. And this might embarrass you, Rowan, but I also wanted to talk about your story, Our Last Guests, which I urge you all, before you go and look at pictures of toilets on YouTube, you navigate to the Granta website and look at Rowan's short story, Our Last Guests, which is narrated by a couple who like the Maitlands in Beetlejuice are kind of trapped in a place. Something to do with ghosts and marriage that go really nice together. I have theories about what that might be, but I think you do such a good job of marital boredom in that story that yeah, that's one of my favorites too.
Thank you. That story came from a conversation where my partner was really sweet and was like, it wouldn't be that bad if we were ghosts together. And I was like, but maybe it would.
Can you imagine being in a room with someone, even if you loved that person and wanted to know everything about them, and there's no food, there's no, kind of like lockdown, isn't it? There's no going out, there's no social life. I don't think the ghosts are having sex either, are they? And that's it for the rest of eternity.
Oh dear. On that jolly note, shall we have
Maybe I should have tried harder to think of a nice, romantic, happy love story. I just couldn't.
Oh dear. But yes, so I think you selected a love-ish themed reading for the second one.
That's everyone's reading list for tonight. You can buy them all from Will. Oh, I see a question. What was the title of the Midwinter book from Sarah? It's Midwinter Break by Burnham McClaverty.
Okay. So could you read for us? Oh no?
Oh, sorry, Rowan. I think there was a little crackle. Are you asking me to do my second reading?
Yes.
I'm ready. Sorry.
Oh no, it's okay. I just worried I was muted and I'd become a ghost.
No, I think what the problem is that my children, unfazed by the dignity of this occasion, are firing up Minecraft or something, and I think there's maybe some internet issues. Anyway, so this is the last reading, and it's an argument. Laurie is looking back on her marriage when we're about 100 pages into the book now, and this is one of the first times that we start to understand that this marriage that she's really wanting to kind of portray to the police anyway as pretty idyllic had some problems, and she tells us about an argument that she and Mark had. Let's take the matter of the colander. We had two colanders, a plastic one with a long handle like a saucepan and a metal one with two small looped handles on either edge. I didn't like using the metal one for actually draining things because the handles were so close to the bowl of the colander itself. I worried about burning my fingers when I was pouring a pan full of boiling water and pasta into it. Instead, I used it to steam vegetables. We didn't have a proper steamer. By putting it on top of a pan of boiling water, then using a pan lid to cover the vegetables inside it, it worked very well. Because of this, I kept it in the drawer where we kept the rest of the metal pans. Hopefully you see already what a dream she is to live with. Mark, who had hands made of asbestos and didn't mind the boiling water splashing at him when he was draining things, found it totally incomprehensible that we'd have two colanders in our tiny kitchen. My position was that he didn't need to comprehend it. He just needed to accept. I saw things differently. I was allowed a say in what objects we had in the kitchen, and he wouldn't always get his own way. In our good times, the long-entrenched disagreement just expressed itself through his insisting on putting the metal colander with the plastic one in the high-up cupboard, so when I looked for it in the pan drawer, I was not able to find it. But as we moved into our bad time, when he spent his evenings in front of his laptop and I spent mine in the room next door, watching his internet activity appear on the screen of my mobile phone, and she's got a keylogger on his laptop, and pretending to read Rebecca, this little colander-shaped flaw in the weave of our shared life started to unravel. Can't you just put it in the top cupboard? It doesn't fit in the drawer. His face appeared in the doorway of the darkened bedroom where I lay. I made the screen of my mobile phone go blank so he wouldn't know I'd been observing him. It fits fine in the drawer. It's a pain to get it out of the top cupboard. It's only a pain because we've got too much stuff. We need to have a sort out. You say that like it's a fact. Your opinion is that we have too much stuff. My opinion is that we don't. Why should yours count for more than mine? For God's sake, Laurie, look at the cupboards. I use them for different things, I said. I can't believe we keep having to have this conversation. Our voices were raised now. Mine first, I will admit that. They're the same. They're exactly the same thing. Is this just about you having to get your own way? Do you want me to burn my hands when I drain the pasta? Is that it? Is there some sick bit of you that wants to punish me? I was out of my bed now, standing there with my hands on my hips. It is hard to argue with dignity when you are undressed. And so I turned my back to him, retrieved my dressing gown from the dirty clothes chair and put it on. You're being ridiculous. That's always how it is, isn't it? I want something, it's stupid. I feel something, it's ridiculous. Laurie, I'm serious. Look at yourself. For the sake of a bit of cupboard space, you want me to burn my hand every time I cook for you? Is that what this is really about? I think it is. You just won't admit it to yourself. You can't stand me, can you? Can we just stick to the facts here? The actual facts of the real world instead of your hysteria and paranoia. And I'll leave it there because I'm peeping at the time, but this goes on for another couple of pages. And what I would advise is, in the matter of colanders, gentlemen, do not use the word hysteria to your wife ever.
Any context at all.
None. Even when it is perhaps appropriate.
Okay, so we have lots of wonderful questions, several of which are about ghosts. So I think I'm going to read 3 of the ghost questions together because I feel they nudge up against each other, and maybe Jen, you can address whichever parts of it feel right to you. So we have, I wonder whether you considered calling the book Loved a Ghost Story. The RE title, were you thinking of that Christina Stead quote, every love story is a ghost story? And then we had a request for if you had author or novel/story recommendations that are about ghosts, would you feel comfortable sharing them?
Okay. Loved a ghost story. Gosh, I didn't ever consider it, Kelly, but that is a really great suggestion. Sadly, a bit too late. The idea of being loved and being ghosted are very, very kind of close together in this book, about getting out of the way when someone is behaving atrociously, and that being a kind of love was something that I wanted to explore as well, that we think love is about being close together and in each other's pockets all the time and sometimes distance. So yeah, that's really great. And yeah, the Christina Stead quote, every love story is a ghost story. Yes, definitely. The idea of I don't know, remembering, of presence, of absence, of haunting, of a couple making an imagined future together by somehow having to come to a shared understanding of a past that is gone. Really, really important themes in the book. Favourite ghost stories? Gosh, this is sort of a specialist subject of mine, so you would think that my brain wouldn't have gone completely blank right now, but it absolutely has. I love Robert Aitman. I don't think all of his work is specifically ghost stories, but they are weird, uncanny stories. Shirley Jackson has got a kind of repeated character in her short fiction who is a man in a blue suit. You can spot him in many of the stories. I don't know if she thinks he's a ghost or if he's a demon or if he's something else, but he crops up over and over again. And it's a kind of Easter egg if you're really, really into that sort of thing. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I'm going to ask for a different question and let my unconscious mind tick away on ghost stories. And if another one occurs to me, I will interrupt myself and tell you.
I know people aren't here for my opinions, but there's also, if you're looking for ghost stories, there's a very good book called Where the Wild Ladies Are by Matsuda Alko, and it has lots of like Japanese ghosts and monsters, and it's very funny as well. So extra ghost story recommendation.
Oh, I'm going to have that one as well. Yeah, funny ghosts are an underrated genre. It's really important.
Yeah, we should have whole sections of bookstores. I mean, Sam, well, I'm not saying you have to do this, but you could. Okay. So sort of on a more writer crafty question, Mark has asked that you're a very prolific writer of short stories as well as novels, and you teach. So I was wondering, and he was wondering, and I also wonder, do you approach the two forms any differently?
Yes, I think short stories are a really much more difficult form, and I think it is a mistake to think about a short story as a little novel or a compressed novel. I'm not a poet. The world of poetry kind of is very grateful for the fact that I'm not a poet. I've tried, and it's always a bad idea. But the way that poems deal with time and with space seem to me that they speak to the short story much more than novels do, or the way that novels deal with sound in the moment much more like radio drama. So I think the first thing I'd say about short fiction is you're not trying to compress a novel into a short space or chop a bit of a novel off. It's something really different. Ali Smith has said that short stories are always about their endings, and because of that, they're always really good places to think about time and about death. So ghost stories are often short stories rather than novels, and I think that's true. And when I begin a novel, most of the time I've no idea how it ends. And when I start a short story, it's often because I've thought of the landing place straight away, where I let go of the reader. So they're different, really different.
I love that. So there's another craft question, which is from someone who's just started reading, and she's wondering about when you begin to see your characters or see the setting of your novel. And I guess I would add a question to that, or a modification of that question myself, which is, I know that some writers do visualize, and it is like a tiny movie in their head. That's how I work. But I know people who only hear their novels and they only hear the rhythm, and they don't necessarily even see them. So I was wondering, the question is wondering, when did you see it? And I'm also saying, do you see it? Is that how it works for you?
I see the people really, really clearly. I try not to describe them too much other than what matters. I think it's important that we know that Laurie is not movie star beautiful, but is just ordinary, as the vast majority of us are. That feels quite important, and it felt quite important to me that she does go on a journey with herself, with her emotions, and in her marriage, but she doesn't get contact lenses and have a blow dry and lose some weight and emerge as someone beautiful at the end, as certain kinds of novels and films require of women, that she's just as kind of scruffy at the end as she is at the beginning. I see the people, I see objects in rooms quite a lot as well. I know what kind of ashtray she's got on her table. I know about the dirty clothes tray, the dirty clothes chair. In Dad's house, I know that there's a big tray of seedlings on the dining room table. So that kind of domestic clutter stuff, their possessions, I see a lot. It's always a bit more effort for me to imagine bigger spaces. So we know that she's on a campus, we know that it's a big campus, we know that she walks around it, but really the only close look at it we get is, I think, a bin that she stands next to when she smokes, and some little objects that she finds in the rooms that she cleans. I delegate quite a lot of that big picture imagining to the reader.
I like the use of delegate there.
Yeah, it's a gift for the reader to join in. I guess maybe that's my focal length as a writer, is the really tight, close stuff around us.
I'll have to steal that expression.
I don't know. I don't hear things at all. When you said that, I thought, oh gosh, that's weird. But I smell things. Someone has said that to me. Someone has said it's weird. You always say what stuff smells like, and I don't think it's weird. So
we have noses for a reason.
That's true.
So actually there was a question about the campus and just sort of settings generally. Was how weird or fun or transgressive was it to write about places and spaces like a campus that you occupy yourself, but through the lens of a character?
Yeah, I guess, I work in a department in a university in the northwest of England. This novel is not explicitly set there, but that is one of the campuses that I know really well. I guess maybe if I had colleagues that were nervous about me writing a campus novel, which I might have cheekily described Ghosted as now and again, they'd be really reassured to know that I'm completely uninterested in the shenanigans of academics. I have to live that life. I don't want to have to transcribe it as well during my writing time. But the idea of writing about a space and looking at it through a different set of eyes, it didn't feel transgressive. It just felt really like enjoyable. When I was a cleaner, and I'm not gonna I'm not going to sentimentalize the work. It was difficult work and it was badly paid. But what I really liked was having access to spaces and being allowed to be anywhere. I'm out now all the time with my dog, and it's a really, when you've got a dog on a lead, you can like truffle around in the undergrowth and like, walk around anywhere you want in the city. So there's something about being in places where you can't be imaginatively that's really, really good fun.
I was smiling at the truffling around. My dog always wants to truffle around when we have to be somewhere, but I have yet to persuade her that that's when it's a walk for purpose and when it's a walk for her. She's like, oh,
it's a good alibi though, isn't it? If you're out with the dog, no one would ever think what in that field, or why is she around the back of that house.
Yeah, you can stop outside people's houses, look at their wallpaper.
Exactly.
Not that I do that, not. But so I think actually you have beautifully linked us to the last audience question, which was, is the cleaning theme a metaphor in the novel, or if not a metaphor, because it is very literally there as well, is it speaking for more than the physical act of cleaning, perhaps?
Yeah, I guess, I'm super interested in cleaning. I see one of my friends here who I've had cleaning type WhatsApp conversations with. I'm not like a super, you wouldn't look in my house and think, here is a woman who's obsessed with cleaning. You just wouldn't. But I'm interested in what it is we do when we do this thing we do every day, the repetition of it. I'm interested in kind of habits, schedules, routines. I'm interested in cleaning that's very often women's work, and it's quite performative work. I'm interested in the way that cleaning has become a kind of hobby on Instagram. Yeah, really curious about all this stuff. I'm interested in the way that cleaning is very often a substitute for something else. It's a way of getting order over the inevitable disintegration of all things. And yeah, the way that I guess my experience of being a cleaner and being both extremely present, extremely essential, and being invisible, and it the work being viewed in certain ways. I'm curious about that. When I was a cleaner, it was at university, and I was also a student. And the way that I was spoken to when I had my tabard on, or the way that I was spoken to when I had a kind of book bag on, it gave me whiplash, and I was exactly the same person. And I'm really curious about that. And in terms of a metaphor, where in Ghosted, it's very much about presence and absence, and it's very much about how she inhabits or doesn't inhabit this space. But I think that this is a theme that I'm going to return to, because I'm not done with it, not done with cleaning.
Ghost and cleaning. We'll have to I feel like I need to have like one of those sort of detective flowcharts on my wall with sort of the string and the arrows, so that I can go through all your books and go, ooh, this is how she's developing this and that.
My just obsession with how we are in domestic spaces has led me finally to cleaning.
No, that's thank you everyone in the audience for asking these wonderful questions and doing my job for me in a wonderful way. And you know, I thank you, Jen, for answering them also thoughtfully and interestingly, and you know, and for writing this book. Go buy this book if you haven't already, from Sam Reed Bookseller. I think you could have bought it with your ticket. If you didn't, it's very tragic and you should probably do it. Or buy one of the many recommended pieces of writing. So yes, thank you all so much for your time and for being here. And Will, is there anything else that I should be saying other than go buy books?
That's always a good message. No, none more so than Independent Bookshop Week, when independent bookshops are dying for custom. But there's been some great recommendations this evening, so any of those would be great. We should also thank Scepter Books for supporting this, particularly Louise Court for helping out arrange all of this wonderful launch. But beyond that, thank you, Rowan. Thank you, Jen. This has been such a wonderful evening, and I'm sure everyone here has so much on their minds, not least the art of tidying up now. So if we take anything away, it will be tidying, I think, and staring into drains and sinks. So that's what I'm off to do. But thank you, everyone, for such a wonderful launch. I'm just delighted. And thanks, Rowan. Thanks, Jen.
Oh, and anyone whose question I altered
Thanks for being
slightly.
here, everyone.
I'm sorry. It was just because I was remembering them on the side and trying not to just read verbatim. It wasn't because the way you put them wasn't good. I was just, you know, trying to give space. Anyway, I'll let everyone get on with their night. Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Bye-bye.